Leah Michelle Resistance Chicks. We're coming at you March 30th, 2017. What are we bringing them next, Leah?
Well, another EU Parliament President, because you guys just don't have one. Antonio Tajani claims there could be as many as 30 million migrants headed to Europe in the coming years and he advocates refugee cities as an answer to the crisis.
That's great. Just gang them all together.
So, this European Union president addressed the migrant crisis and its focus, which has shifted sharply to the Mediterranean route from North Africa to his native Italy. Tajani admitted that terror groups like these Islamic State, ISIS, have used the migrant crisis to sneak fighters into Europe, as we saw.
No kidding.
In Italy to commit terror attacks, and noted that immigration, terrorism, and the economy were top of his agenda in an interview with a German newspaper. On the subject of migration from Africa, Tajani said Africa is in a dramatic position. The desert eats agricultural land, which is true, the desertification. The terrorist organizations persecute Christians and moderate Muslims. Nigeria and Niger are in poverty. In Somalia, there's drought and civil war. He says if we do not manage to solve the central problems in African countries, 10, 20, or even 30 million migrants will come to the European Union in 10 years. To solve the crisis, Tajani said the EU member states should invest billions into the economies of African nations. The EU leader noted the Chinese presence in Africa, but did not think the Chinese were interested in stability. Africa is now risking becoming a Chinese colony, but the Chinese want only the raw materials. Stability does not interest them. One of the solutions Tajani proposes is to create refugee cities, similar to proposals made by Austrian Foreign Minister Sebastian Kurz. I imagine provisional cities with hospitals and facilities for children where people can live temporarily. We must prevent the migrants from getting caught in the traffickers' traps and dying while traveling through the desert or across the Mediterranean, he said. Tajani is also worried by the potential of terror groups like Boko Haram of Nigeria traveling to Europe by crossing the Mediterranean, but stressed the main source of terrorism flowed into the bloc comes via the Balkan route. He said that Europeans should not stay at home because of terrorism and should go out and be social, but added, we will, therefore, have to get used to increased police checks. I would be happy to be more controlled by police. The topic of Islamification was touched upon as Tajani mentioned the character of Europe being specifically Christian. Whoever has a strong identity does not need to be afraid of others. We must defend our identity, he said. If we do not defend our values, the newcomers will make their rules. The U.S. shows how to do it. There is a flag in front of many houses. Interestingly enough, our friend living
in France
said you don't fly a French flag. Except for national holidays or things like that. And if she had put out an American flag over a French home, it would really draw some stares, which I find interesting. So there's a lot to this. That was a mouthful, and you could talk about this for hours.
The only thing that stood out to me, well, there were two things specifically. He's talking about these refugee cities, and I'm thinking that's a bad idea. Clump them all together into one place. And then he's talking about pouring money by the EU into these places so that people can stay there, essentially. And if you don't pour all that money into those countries and stuff like that, then by X amount of dates, you're going to have X amount of people here. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so why not have refugee cities in those places where there are those hospitals and whatnot? And we have said this from the very beginning, that if you're going to be throwing money, your money goes much farther in the countries of their origin, of these migrants' origin, than it does by just taking in X amount of migrants.
This is a huge issue. I mean, if you look at South Africa right now, where there is reverse apartheid, going on, and some of you have sent me some links for that. I haven't had a chance to do a whole episode on it. I've seen some of them, the army and the black army in South Africa singing and dancing "Kill the Boer, Kill the Boer," which is these Christians, white Christians who live down there. It's a really weird situation that you have down there, specifically in South Africa. But Africa as a whole is not an impoverished continent.
Right.
They are rich. in natural resources. Why do you think China is there getting raw materials? And so what do? They build roads and the infrastructure just for themselves.
Right.
And, if you've seen the movie Blood Diamond, if you recognize that the Western people are profiting off of the basic goods in Africa. And it's a really sick, weird dynamic where you have the West saying, we kind of destroyed, a lot of, by taking a lot of your goods. And now we're going to come in and again fix it. And this is where we back away from government and we say, listen, a lot of bad dudes do a lot of bad things. And so I understand the migration. I understand people coming in from Mexico. We talked about how the American government promoted the planting from cornrow to cornrow, their words, of corn. And they promote the use of GMO corns. Even Ted Cruz does. Monsanto is in...
Pretty much they went down... and corn was a very big crop. Farming was a very huge part of Mexico's economy in South America. And we went in and we just decided it all has to be corn, it all has to be a GMO, it all has to be Monsanto, and pretty much caused the average farmer to collapse.
We flooded their market with American-grown corn.
Exactly.
So that American farmers made a profit, a slim profit.
Right.
And the Mexican farmers did not. So there's a huge dynamic of issues, and throwing money is never the answer.
Right.
You can't fix things. It's like having Daddy Warbucks or whatever who, what's wrong with this kid? Why is he acting up? I'm just going to keep throwing money at him.
Right.
I'm not going to give him love. I'm not going to give him attention. I'm not going to show them that they have value.
Right.
And a lot of people in Africa would say, stop sending us aid, because what you do is you have people living off the aid, and you break up these small little micro economies where, you might have a woman who weaves baskets. But if you bring in a bunch of baskets, and she's out of work and she doesn't have a job, right? So if you're bringing in a bunch of dried milk, and you've got somebody who's milking goats.
It's a big deal for people in Africa to get a cow.
Right.
Right? I mean, that is a huge deal. All of a sudden, you've got a cow and you have a business.
Right. So there are ways to help Africa, but it can't be by flooding with aid. You have to be very careful. And that's
the thing. They don't think these things through first. They don't think about anything but themselves and trying to look good, and this is what we want to do, and this is how we are going to help, instead of thinking, you know what, we're going to go in and we're going to, and there are some ministries in different places that do this. We're going to help you buy a cow. We're going to help you get some goats. We're going to help you get some chickens. We're going to help you do something like that. We're going to help your city do a well. That's the kind of aid that should be taking place.
It was... When you cut down all the vegetation, you cut down all the trees, you create deserts.
Exactly.
So you have this desertification, how do you say it? Desertification. And you have to reclaim, and you can reclaim deserts, okay? But it takes time, and it takes intensive management of the land. I've seen some blogs and things like that where real farmers are working intensely to bring back the vegetation. But it takes time. You've got to put animals on it. You've got to rotate. You can bring these things back. The desertification happens when you strip mine everything.
Right.
And so it's greed and industrialization.
Yeah.
That is
and unfortunately,
it's
also big capitalism.
Oh yeah, sure. And
so that needs to be taken into account.
there's a lot of things. There's a huge. I mean, you can't just say Africa.
Right.
You can't just say Africa. Every single area has different issues and
nuances.
Some people and if you look at some of these cultures are thriving, and so just stay away, And anyways, I could go on and on.
All right, you guys. This is Leah Michelle signing off for Resistance Chicks, where it's not a conspiracy theory. If it's the truth, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Mass Faith 3 and
Tell us
Resistance
what you
Chicks.
think about this one.
Exactly. We want to hear what you guys have to say about this.
Yeah, discussion about this.
Ring that bell for notifications and find us on Facebook and Twitter.
I was cold all alone. No place for home every day. So afraid, but you called my name.